All right, we are live on Facebook. Welcome to our Tuesday talk. I am streaming live from Floyd, Virginia. This is Hannah Levin with Heartfelt Wellbeing. And we're in springtime right now. Happy spring equinox. It's also the new moon, which is a great time to plant seeds of intention of what will grow as you move through this lunar cycle for the next 28 days. And we're in this community, in the Heartfelt Wellbeing community, we just started the spring detox. So this is a really powerful time to align with the wisdom of nature, the wisdom of our bodies, and to notice a lot of things that are going on in our inner and outer world. There's always a reflection. And so I wanted to dive in today a little deeper into explaining how Ayurveda understands it's the process of pathogenesis, how disease manifests in us. And a lot of us might say disease, like I don't have any disease. And in Ayurveda, we really see dis-ease as the pulled apart word. Dis-ease is disease, right? So if we're not in a place of ease, then we're in dis-ease. And that's you'll come to see through this talk today, really what this is about noticing and being able to cultivate the tools to heal ourselves before we get to the state where Western medicine would classify us as having a disease. And so I have one of my Ayurvedic textbooks here with me that I'm going to share with, as well as some of my notes. And I hope that this is interesting and helpful and gives you some very specific tools to support your learning with Ayurveda, but not even like so much book learning as much as learning how to support yourself and your loved ones with awareness of what can happen with food and lifestyle changes. So let's dive in, shall we? So in Ayurveda, there's the understanding of the process of disease is called Samprapti. So Samprapti is the process of disease, and there are 6 stages of disease. And I'm going to share with you a graphic that I will talk you through. So this is just a picture that I took. This graphic is really helpful for being able to see a visual of what exactly is happening. So I'll talk us through this. And I will say that, understanding dosha is really helpful. And looking at the qualities of each dosha. So for Vata being air and space, and dry, light, cold, mobile, subtle, rough being the qualities there, Pitta being made up of fire and water, hot, sharp, bright, spreading, and then Kapha being made up of earth and water, heavy, dull, static, cool, soft, cloudy. And so when we understand those qualities, we can begin to see how they show up in our experience. So when we first look at the stages of the process of disease, what we want to acknowledge is that at some point we get to experience, and that might be only when we're very young. Ideally, there are times throughout our lives when we experience being in healthy balance, that all the energies of the elements are balanced within us in our own particular recipe of our prakriti, of the balance of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha that is unique to each of us. When things start to get out of balance, it's like a drippy faucet that you can't actually turn off. So this is called Sanchaya stage. It's the number 1 stage, accumulation. So this is when dosha begins to accumulate in its own site. So in its own site, meaning that each of the doshas have a home site in the digestive tract. And remember that Ayurveda sees that everything originates in the gut, which Western medicine is just discovering more and more how true this is. So our digestive organs are the seat of each of the doshas. So the stomach is the seat of kapha, the small intestine is the seat of pitta, and the large intestine and colon is the seat of vata. So we want to keep everything in the digestive tract, ideally in terms of imbalances. So, you might have a little something here and there, a little sick to the stomach, a little, something that shows up. We want to pay attention to that. So in the stage of accumulation, the dosha begins to accumulate in its own site. So that might show up for each of the doshas. It will show up for kapha as feeling more heavy, for pitta as feeling like more liquid qualities in the body, and for vata it's feeling cold. So we need to pay attention to these things. There's so much in the work that I do where there's a lot of ahas of like, oh yeah, I noticed that, but I just thought it was normal, or I just thought that I had to live like that. And what I want to help us do is to change that inner conversation to one of paying attention so that we can support ourselves in not living with these imbalances instead of telling ourselves the story that, oh, now you're stuck with this. Let me read to you a little bit about accumulation. So this marks the first stage of imbalance. In this stage, vata, pitta, or kapha accumulate in their own sites. Symptoms at this stage are usually mild and intermittent, but the condition can be detected even at this early time. So again, we're paying attention, noticing things might show up in different ways. So vata accumulation may be experienced as constipation, abdominal distension, or gases in the colon. So how many vata predominant folks out there are like, yeah, I'm just gassy all the time, or I only poop every other day or once a week, right? So, and we might say, that's just the way I am, but you're setting yourself up. This leaky faucet is continuing to leak, and that's a problem. So for pitta, it may look like buildup, may be felt as heat around the belly button and can be observed as a slightly yellowish discoloration in the whites of the eyes, or dark yellow urine. And I would say sour smelling urine too. The person will be quite hungry and they may crave candy and sugar. So if you're pitta predominant and you're like, oh, I just thought that that was normal. A lot of us just say, oh yeah, I just kind of do that and on with life. We tend to prioritize all the other things in our lives, right? Like work, family, all the external things that are being asked of us, and we're not really paying attention. So these are kind of the first layers. And accumulated kapha leads to feelings of heaviness, lethargy, fullness of the stomach, and a low appetite. So when we start feeling these things, we generally dismiss them and we don't do anything. Ideally, we want to balance with the wisdom of opposites. So that cold of vata, we want to bring in warmth, like just drinking hot tea more regularly can be really helpful. And for pitta, it might be doing cooling foods, or doing some meditation practices, some cooling to the mind. And for kapha, it will look more like fasting, having longer periods of time in between meals. If we know how to recognize these signs, we can balance with the wisdom of opposites, which is the real gold in Ayurveda, in being able to heal ourselves before we have to go to a medical professional and say help. And this is a lot of what I do in working with the clients that I am honored to work with in the Vitality Circle, is to really help them begin to have a relationship with their bodies, that they can be able to have the tools to then be like, oh, this is happening, I'm going to try this. And there's no just one way to do it. Like if we know we need warmth, hot tea is not the only way, right? We could take a hot bath, we could move our bodies and build some warmth, we could eat some heating spices, right? So it's kind of fun when you get to play around with it. I digress. So at this stage, the accumulation stage, the individual is still quite healthy. And when a dosha begins to build, the body's intelligence creates an aversion to the causal factor and a craving for the opposite qualities, both of which help restore balance. So this is when we tend to have healthy cravings. So if we're feeling lethargic, and don't have much of an appetite, we're going to maybe crave something like a brothy, spicy soup, as opposed to eating ice cream or something like that. That's just going to make us more cold and heavy. Like at this stage, listening to the wisdom of your body and not continuing to increase the imbalance is really, really helpful. And so after, if that is not attended to at the stage of accumulation, sanchaya, and it continues to, so the drips in the bucket start filling the bucket. So the next stage is prakopa or provocation. And this is when the level begins to rise of, like, we have our capacity, the bucket, and it begins to rise in its own container. So we begin to have more kapha build up in the stomach, more pitta build up in the small intestines, more vata build up in the large intestine and colon. So aggravating influences might cause the functions of the dosha to degrade, moving it to the second stage of provocation. In this stage, the doshic level rises in its own container of the body. So it's still staying within the digestive tract. So for example, if one eats too much kapha-provoking food on Saturday night, he may feel full upon waking on Sunday and think, maybe I should fast or eat lightly today. But then an invitation comes for Sunday brunch and the person eats heavily again. The next day, a cold, cough, or congestion may develop as the kapha begins to move upward. So kapha is that accumulation of congestion, of mucus, of the secondary site is the lungs. So it may go into the respiratory system. So, and then we wonder, why did I get sick, right? And we're like, oh, I probably picked up a virus or whatever. We don't look at what's happening upstream that has contributed. And maybe there was a virus involved too, but not always. So excess pitta in the second stage may cause acid indigestion and heartburn or even nausea. Now, this is really interesting because I talk to a lot of people that are dealing with heartburn, acid reflux, GERD, and they're put on drugs. And again, we're not looking upstream. What is happening here? There's an imbalance. We need to look at the root of what's happening, not necessarily just put a Band-Aid on what's showing up. Vata rising may cause pain in the flanks or mid-back, so lower body pain, gurgling, and even breathlessness. So we might need some balancing there. For Vata, it'll be more in the realm of moisture and warmth. And so it's very powerful to be able to see how these communications from our bodies are actually so wise, and they have a lot to tell us. So according to Ayurvedic therapeutics, the disease process can be addressed at any stage, but specific treatments are needed for specific stages. So in these first two stages, the accumulation and the provocation, one can reverse the process by oneself. You don't have to go to a doctor, but you need to know this knowledge, which is like why I want to teach everybody. So using common sense to apply the principles of opposite qualities decreasing each other and taking some home remedies once the disease process has gone beyond the gastrointestinal tract and has entered the third phase, it is difficult to restore balance on one's own, and the advice and guidance of a healthcare professional is usually needed. So If it stays within the bucket, within the container of the digestive tract, you're able to heal very simply. And that requires awareness and skill to be able to notice. And that's something that we work on all the time when you work with me, is noticing. We're not taught to pay attention to the signs from our bodies. We're taught to suppress them and to move on and to show up without any internal issues going on in the world. So there's a lot of repression going on. So when we reach the third stage, which is prasara, which is the spread, the dosha leaves its site and it spreads into other parts of the body. So this is when things start to not go so well. This is often at the point where people will seek some sort of help, probably going to the doctor. So further aggravation escalates the situation to the third stage of prasara, or spread. In this stage, the doshas leave their site and seek other places in the body toward which they have an affinity. So this produces prodromal signs and symptoms called purva rupa that are the manifestations of this spread. So for example, vata in this stage will leave the colon and enter general circulation looking for a place to enter. It will tend to go to secondary vata sites, such as skin, ears, bones, and the thighs. This produces signs and symptoms such as dry skin, goosebumps, cold hands and feet, ringing in the ears, tingling and numbness, and quivering in the thighs. The same is true for pitta and kapha. Pitta moves from the small intestine to the secondary site like the stomach, eyes, sweat glands, skin, heart, and subcutaneous fat. This can cause heartburn, burning eyes, acidic sweat, hives, rashes, urticaria, burning sensations, and many other symptoms. Kapha travels from the stomach to the lungs, sinuses, lymphatic system, breast tissue, the mouth, and the head. It produces water retention, sinus congestion, lymphatic congestion, heavy breasts, excessive salivation, a heavy feeling in the head. Hold on. My throat is getting dry. Balancing with the wisdom of opposites, right? Dryness, bringing in some moisture. So cold and clammy skin and other signs and symptoms. So this is when it's a little too late to just treat on our own, but it can still be healed with support. So as long as doshas are in the first or second stage, remaining in the gastrointestinal tract, they are at the home of Agni, or the digestive fire. In Agni's presence, they are said to act like gentlemen and ladies, and they create awareness in us for craving the opposite. So we do have that, if we're paying attention, that initial awareness. Once a dosha leaves the home of Agni and enters prasara, or spread, it behaves like a rebellious vagabond and creates like cravings in order to further its journey to the next stage of disease. So this is, you maybe heard me say like increases like. So one of the things that I see a lot is if you eat a lot of sugar, you crave more sugar. And so initially, when that taste is starting to get out of balance for you, you won't crave sugar, but you probably won't notice that. You'll be eating some sugar, and then you might crave some green vegetables. And maybe you listen to that, maybe not. And then you keep eating sugar. So over time, you've overridden your body's natural ways of communicating for a balance. And then you start craving what puts you into further imbalance. So then we go to the fourth stage, which is deposition or localization, moving to a spot with some weakness, and it deposits there. So the aggravated dosha will tend to move into a spot that has some weakness or defect due to previous trauma, genetic predisposition, accumulated emotional stress, repressed emotions, or other factors. These weak spots are called kavagunya, or defective space. They can be described as negative locations, like potholes on the road. Upon entering this space, the dosha influences the tissue with its qualities, increasing those qualities within the tissue. In other words, this would bring the qualities of dry, light, cold, etc., to the tissue with vata, and these qualities would increase within the tissue. So you might have parts of your body that kind of talk to you when you're getting out of balance. So often that I see that in people in vata stage of life with joints, that they'll feel like, oh yeah, I'm like, my joints are swollen or painful, or don't feel like they're functioning correctly. Yeah, and then at this stage, they start to move into tissue layers, which are the dhatus, which are different from what we understand tissue to be from Western science, but it begins to break down the tissue as it goes into the next layer of manifestation. So within each of the dhatus, or the tissue layers, there's a unique agni for that tissue layer. And when dosha comes and invades, and it's often vata dosha, because vata is the dosha of movement, and it is the basis for probably 90%. I think 85% is what Charaka Samhita says is vata is responsible for 85% of diseases. So it's kind of the trickster that moves around a lot. It wreaks havoc throughout the body. So it starts to change the dhatu agnis as it goes into other places in the deposition and localization, the sthana samshraya. So then the fifth stage is vyakti, or manifestation. The dosha manifests with pathological changes in the tissues, producing cardinal signs and symptoms. Sometimes people wait till this stage to get any kind of support. What I would like to see is that we don't wait for any stages to get support, that we learn how to be healthy and to recognize these signs through learning Ayurveda, so that when they do show up, we're ready for these signs, and we don't wait for something to get to stage 3, 4, 5, or 6. So in stage 5, manifestation, qualitative changes become apparent, and the cardinal signs and symptoms of disease can be observed. The dosha has conquered the dhatu, that's the tissue, due to disturbed dhatu agni. So the tissues are no longer able to function correctly. And the subtle attributes of the dosha manifest according to the specific etiological factors. The qualities of the dosha suppress the natural qualities of the dhatus, resulting in pathological conditions. So one can not only identify the illness, but also point to the particular qualities of the dosha that are playing. Yeah, so this is hard if you don't know a whole lot of Ayurveda. However, you will know that something's like, this is when your body's like, I'm not gonna compensate anymore. And this is a challenging thing, that we end up going into getting a diagnosis of disease. And then the 6th stage is differentiation or destruction, called beta. And this is, we don't want to get to that stage ideally. So in the final stage, the disease has fully manifested with structural changes. So in the 6th stage, structural changes manifest. Complications of other organs, tissues, or systems also become evident. This stage is the final expression of the disease process. The disease has completely manifested along with complications. For example, Vata may not only affect the joint space, but also the surrounding soft tissue, leading to such problems as muscle wasting, frozen joints, and deformity. Function is disturbed in the 5th stage, but in the 6th stage, the structure of the tissue is affected as well as the functioning of the surrounding tissues and systems. So I think, most of us are familiar with like thinking about cancer spreading or things like that at first it starts in one place and then it might spread to other places and then it wreaks havoc in the system. Now with Ayurveda, when we look at like reversing disease states, when you get to definitely 6, often 5, we can't reverse the disease state, but we can palliate, right? It's not that we don't treat it. We do treat it and help the person through diet and lifestyle, support their physiology and mind through these techniques of Ayurveda, but the damage that's been done is often too far to totally reverse. And so that can be really challenging. So the main point that I wanted to, I hope that this is kind of cool to see that there's like this process, right? That we can engage with noticing and therefore be able to take part in our own healing along the way. So yeah, so most of the time, if dosha isn't continually imbalanced, we'll move between stage 1 and stage 2. And this is where we really want to catch things. Again, this is where we can reverse things. Flowing with the seasons is a really important part of being able to keep disease states from progressing, believe it or not. It might sound frivolous to be like, do a seasonal detox in the spring and the fall. Really focus on seasonal alignment with your activities, with your food, with your schedule. All of these things are so powerful. And our Western minds tend to think, oh, that's not doing much, so it's not going to make a big difference. It makes a huge difference over time for your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And so being able to cultivate the votes, it's like putting in your votes each day for what's going to happen down the road. So we're not going down this path constantly in multiple ways, perhaps, of Samprapti, that we're really paying attention and gathering the knowledge so that we can support ourselves. So really aligning with the seasons is a big part of what we can do to prevent things going past the provocation stage number 2. So I hope that this was interesting. I hope it's inspiring, not scary. And I hope that you're curious about how learning your constitution, the dosha predominance of any imbalances that you have that are categorized as dis-ease, you can learn the tools through diet and lifestyle changes, perhaps using some herbal medicine as well, to support your body to live in optimal balance as you age, that you don't need to feel like you're just declining as you go through life. You can become stronger and wiser and more attentive and in tune. And the healthier each of us are, the more health we can inspire in others around us, for the planet. We're more aligned, we're more clear, we're more capable. And I see that as a great asset to the reality that we're all being a part of right now. So if you're curious about working with me further, I would love to talk with you. I'll post a link for a clarity call if you're interested in diving into this in-depth work that I do with women specifically, and working towards building your own knowledge base so that you have the tools. There's no better return on investment, seriously, to have the tools to be able to balance the imbalances as they show up. So we just nip them in the bud. And if there are things that have progressed, and most of us, by the time we've lived a few decades, there are significant imbalances, that we can reverse them. And that has been so inspiring and empowering for me in my own health journey, and also in those journeys of all of the women that I am blessed to work with. So reach out. I hope you're inspired, that you're never stuck. There's always something that you can do. And Ayurveda is this ancient wisdom tradition that is still so applicable today. So let me know if you're interested in connecting further, and we will be back together soon for more learning, more empowerment. Thank you all for being here. Take care.